In our study of the Holy Trinity of Astrology, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, we're using the tarot model to look more deeply into the nature of freedom, evolution and creativity, which I'm proposing are the three essential ingredients of life. It's the essence of what we're doing. And we come to the Temperance card, and we're in the Path of Magick at the moment, which card Temperance represents evolution. Now this is very interesting. Temperance is a word which is much misused, I find. The word temperance was used 100 years ago for people that didn't approve of drinking alcohol, the temperance society. And if one has a temper, one is given to anger. And tempering steel is a metallic process which has an effect upon the material. So we've got different ways of using this word temper and tempering and temperance, which are very different from one another. And in fact, you can see that in some sort of hidden way, they're actually opposite to one another. There has been some confusion about the meaning of the word temperance. The people that want us to give up alcohol, the Temperance Society, they want one thing: no alcohol. The people that want us to have a temper or not have a temper, they're talking about one thing. His anger is allowed out. He has a temper, so he is angry. But that's not what the word means. Neither of those two things. One refers to somebody's darker side, their anger. If you have a temper, then you've got your dark side uncontrolled. What it means to say he has a temper is he has no temperance. That's what it means, the very opposite. Whereas the Temperance Society is also the very opposite. Don't drink. They're not saying temper drinking with not drinking. They're saying don't drink. Again, the very opposite of the true meaning. So we do need to be aware and to beware of how corrupted words are and how that affects what happens in our minds when we use that word. You corrupt your mind when you actually use words that don't mean what they say. It changes how you can think. It denies you of crystalline, clear thinking. The word temperance means moderate. It's bringing balance back. And in Sufism, it would be the balance of wine and water. These two metaphors are very powerful within Sufism. Wine is the spiritual fire. It is fire water. And water is crystal clarity, the truth. And so we have a sense of what we're doing here on our path of magic. And it is not too much of either the spiritual or the worldly. Now, this again is a controversial teaching. It is generally thought that spiritual is better than worldly. That's not what this card is teaching. This card is teaching that whatever is out of balance needs to be brought back into balance. You temper something to soften its extreme form. Now, I had a look at the word tempering on Google and looked at the process of what that is. It's a metallic production process. If you're producing steel, then a part of the process is tempering. And what happens when you make metal hard? You give it a lot of strength, but you make it brittle. It's very likely to break under certain pressure. So you introduce tempering in order to produce certain qualities of the metal. It's tough and it's hard. It relieves stress to do the tempering. It strengthens it and makes it more flexible. And it actually makes the metal more compatible through a magnetic process with other metals. You can work metals together then into a collaborative form. Now you apply those ideas to a person. Temperance makes us tougher, and yet brings about flexibility that makes us more readily able to interact with other people. And this gives the real clue. There are people, in fact, there's a lot of people, that come to spirituality and magic through a kind of refusal of the world. I did. That was how I got into all of this stuff. I just got fed up with seeing all the lies and the cheating and the nastiness in the world, and I just rejected it. And I went off on a path of certainty that spirituality was better than worldliness, and that because I was a spiritual person, I'd become a better person than what I was previously. I was convinced of this. And that's what the teachings were all about. Spirituality is better than worldliness. And yet it does make you brittle. It makes you subject to difficulty in engaging with worldliness. And I had such difficulty myself. I couldn't relate to people at all. I'm not sure if I can anymore at all, but the relating to the hardness of the world becomes a real problem to highly sensitive spiritual beings. And here we have a teaching around that. The tarot secret is a teaching. If you want to practice magic, if you want to evolve, then actually you need to temper the spiritual wisdom that you have with some worldliness. Now that's not giving up spirituality, that's finding an application for it, bringing light into the darkness. Until you have darkness, you don't know what your light is. You just don't know. You can't know. There is no way of knowing. It's a silly question to ask. Light depends upon darkness in order to know itself. So, as beings of light, we depend upon shadow behavior of worldly people in order for us to know that we're not like them. We're not the same. We need to contrast the light part of us with the dark part of other people, other situations, other scenarios in life. And in order to be able to do that, we need to relate to those more worldly situations. Now that relating can only take place through the principle of resonance. Nothing can relate to something else unless there is resonance. So we have to resonate with worldliness in order to have any relationship with it at all. And if we want to bring our light into dark situations, we have to resonate with those dark situations to some extent first. When we consider the elements, earth, water, fire, and air, usually people have preference, almost always, and they will stick to those preferences. If you're a person who's got the balance of earth and fire, then you'll get things done with vigor and energy. If you're somebody who's air and water, you'll relate to people on a very sensitive emotional level. If you're fire and water, you'll be excitable and exciting and really interesting and get things done, but get really passionate about it, and so on. So there's these combinations very often of two elements that describe the fundamental personality of a person. What a Sufi does in any situation which has got a mix of energies, a balance of energies, which is not a complete equal balance of all four, the Sufi will try to introduce balance, bring about ether. And this is done through the process of tempering. In other words, you resonate with the energy that is and soften it. You bring it towards a golden mean. So if somebody's being loud, you mute that. If somebody's being quiet, then you embellish that. If somebody's being self-effacing, you encourage confidence within them. If they're being arrogant, you point out the benefits of humility. You mute situations. You bring it towards a balance point. And you do this with the process of temperance. Now, one of the most profound Sufi teachings of philosophy is that the Sufi is in the world, but not of the world. That's the way it's put. In other words, we're in the world. We're operating within the constraints of worldliness. And we're with people who may not be awakening people. They probably aren't in most cases. But we're in that world. And we can, to some significant extent, escape the worst of it. But nevertheless, we still have to interact with people who are not awakening. They're not emphasizing the spiritual aspect of their being. And we have to relate to them as being in the world. But we're not of the world. We're made of clay. The physical body is of the world, yes. But we, on a soul level, the I behind the I which is greater than the ego, the I that has a personality, not is a personality. That's not of this world at all. That's eternal, and it's infinite, and it's not lost to us. It's within our range of consciousness, if we choose that, so we can actually choose to relate to the world at the level of soul to some extent. Most people would find that strange that we would meet them, but not everyone. Some people want to relate on that level to each other. And we can choose to relate to ourselves on that level. That's the main thing. By choosing by learning the technique to enter soul consciousness. So we can access the awareness of self as an infinite eternal being. Either through meditation, that's the starting point, and other spiritual practices. Meditation is a starting point. You need other spiritual practices to move to higher levels of consciousness. Mantra, visualization, a combination of all of these things together, and training. And then you can get to a level where you can enter soul consciousness pretty much at will. Although we've all got investment in our worldliness, so we can't always do it. Sometimes the world is too much. The passions of the world just prevent us from settling peacefully into soul consciousness. However, we can access it most of the time, every day, if we choose to. And we can also bring that level of consciousness to bear upon our transactions in the world, our relationships, whether it's with lovers or shopkeepers or bosses. How we interact with the world can be an expression of our soul's journey. Because if we do not express the soul's journey in our worldliness, then it's not expressed. There isn't anywhere else to do it. When you've got a physical body, you're certain to express yourself through worldliness. And so that's what temperance is all about. Learning how to express your soul consciousness in your worldly situations. Being in the world, but not of the world. In any situation, there are facts and there are feelings. The facts of the matter, what is, and it's measurable. And other people agree. You've got this amount of money. You've got that car and that house and those kids and so on. You've got facts. But then there's this other side, this inner sense of self, this secret side, the hidden side that nobody really gets to know of you. And actually, because no one else recognizes knows again, recognizes you. It's very hard to recognize yourself. Until you recognize yourself, you are not. You are not fully here. So that job of self-recognition is very important indeed. And we have access to that self-recognition largely through our feelings. The soul's way of communicating to us and through us really is feelings. It's the energy of atmosphere of your being, the nuanced sense of subtle atmosphere that you create when you're in a certain mood, when you're in a certain consciousness. You bring a sense of beingness to bear upon a situation. So when we're talking about being in the world but not of the world, we're talking about being in the world, not doing in the world, but being. And within us very deeply is this sense of being or beingness, what we are, not what we do or what we think or what we say, but what we are. And when we have access to that, we're in soul consciousness. Beingness, soul's awareness. Notwithstanding the facts of the matter, however, we do have to relate to the external world with our sense of internal beingness. And that sense of relating, seeing both sides of the equation simultaneously, is what temperance is. It is explained that the route, the path that we walk to greater awakening is best summarized by the phrase reflexive self-consciousness. Reflexive, you look at yourself as if through the eyes of another. You see yourself as if mirrored by your situations and circumstances. All of the people that you relate to are reflecting you to yourself, and they will give you points of view, some of which make you feel good, some of which make you feel the opposite, you don't want it. Both of those are good feedback for you. That's all it is. It's feedback. It's not judgment. It's not blame. It's not a requirement. It's feedback. And your whole life story is nothing more than a feedback process. In order for you to take into account another perception, a different perception of you from somebody whose agenda is not making you feel good all the time. And when you get that more legitimate, honest feedback, you have a sense of interacting with it. And this is the teaching, the teaching of temperance. When we interact with the outside world, we should try and find that sense of balance between our own strategy in the world, our own well-being on the worldly stage, on the one hand, and our soul's beingness on the other. It's wrong to think that you can live life successfully without both of those in balance. Reflexive self-consciousness gives you that sense of awareness of self in the context of the world. And this is what promotes the greatest level of spiritual attainment. When we can do that, when we can find the balance between the inner and the outer, between fact and feeling, between spirituality and materiality, between water and wine. So we temper our wine with water. We don't get ridiculously over-passionate about anything, including God. We temper it. But equally, we spice up our water with a bit of wine. We make life a little bit interesting. And all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, is the saying here. All work and no prayer. You're missing the point a little bit. Equally, all prayer and no pleasure. Well, that's a bit dry, isn't it? It's a bit dull. That's the Jack is the dull boy part of it. So having both of those things in balance That's a real challenge. It's very difficult indeed to become spiritually awakened without a commitment, an involvement, a passionate involvement in that path, and to some significant extent giving up the worldliness. However, if you only develop spiritually and you don't bring your worldly life to bear upon the question, then there's something hollow, there's something wrong. It doesn't quite get there. It has to be applicable in context. You have to bring your spirituality to bear upon your circumstances, the people in your life. You incarnated in order to be worldly. If you didn't want that experience, there's no point in incarnating at all. You might as well stay on the astral. But you did incarnate, all of us did. And we did this because we want to cope with worldliness. And it is temperance that makes us able to cope with that. So in one sense we can say that temperance is the card which is the measurement of the effect of your spiritual practices. If your spiritual practices work, if they're having an effect to change how you are and to find out more deeply who you are, then we will know that the spiritual practices are working because we have greater sense of being worldly with our spirituality, being spiritual within the worldliness. So the effect of our spiritual practices is this ability to temper situations. Now, it's rather more easily able, we are more easily able to access our worldliness, obviously, because we have a physical body. There's no real choice. So the card kind of points to the need for us to find access to that which is much more difficult to find, which is the angelic counterpart. There are planes of consciousness. So there's the earth plane, and then the astral plane, and the plane of love, harmony, and beauty. And it goes all the way up to the plane of unity, including the higher realms, which are the archangels, different types of archangels. Now, all of these are within us. There is nothing that exists which is not within us, a part of us. So God somewhere within us, archangels somewhere within us, everything that we can think of and conceive of and exists has the ability to resonate with who we are. In other words, it's a part of who we are. So in order for us to awaken the high level of consciousness associated with the temperance card, we need to access that point of resonance with the highest archangels, the light aspects of our being, the angelic givers of light, where we can just tune in. It's well beyond the level of heart love and heart courage and spiritual commitment and prayer. It's well beyond these levels. It's on the level of awareness of all and everything. We move ourselves to that level of awareness where we don't really have any appetite to look for the world, because this is just amazing and demanding to hold that consciousness. So if we can get to that level of archangelic light, which is an aspect of ourself, and hold that consciousness and simultaneously know what's going on in the world at the same time as being in this high level of cosmic consciousness, nevertheless knowing what's going on in your circumstances. It's enough to know what's going on, because you don't have to do anything but be aware of the physical situation. It just resolves. If you hold high level of spiritual consciousness in any situation, you don't really have to do anything, because just holding it is such an achievement that it produces a magnetism that has an extraordinary effect upon the atmosphere. Very few people move into archangelic consciousness in worldly situations. You'd need to go on retreat with a very high level teacher in order to get that. But if you are actually able to tune into the angels And the angels are not silly little dolls that you put on Christmas trees. They're vast beings of light, so huge. Their consciousness is larger than a planet, and their ability is more profound than the sun, Angels have been dumbed down like most things in spiritual teachings. Now, if you can access that aspect of yourself and hold on to that awareness of self, you don't have to do anything in life. But you do have to notice that you are in life. You have to be in the world. And you have to involve yourself. This is a card within the magical triplicity, which stands for evolution. This is how we get involved in life, how the light can reach into the darkness to have an effect by our involvements. Without involvements, you wouldn't be able to do that. So we have to be involved, but we don't have to be involved by doing anything particularly. We have to be involved by being highly conscious, highly aware, and noticing what's going on. If we're a presence in any situation, then we're influencing that situation. And if we don't speak, we don't act, we don't do anything except hold that awareness of the archangelic presences, then we are likely to be the most influential factor in that group, in that life. So it's quite a high achievement, and it creates a magical result. This changes things without having to do anything except know that you are one with your archangelic self. People who do this from time to time have a kind of spiritual lucidity. They never get confused. They know what's what's real, that they have supreme faith, that everything is fine, that nothing needs to be done. These people have tremendous spiritual clarity. And their personalities are sober. They would not really expect to go into their passions in any way at all in life. So they wouldn't be too far lost in their cups. They wouldn't drink a lot of wine. They wouldn't get too far into the realm of drugs. They wouldn't get too far into the realm of ambition and worldly importance. They would be sober types, trustworthy, rather bland on the surface perhaps. They would not be extravagantly eccentric, typically, these kind of people. My Sufi teacher was exactly like that. He just fitted in wherever he went. He was just a balancing factor, bringing moderation all the time. Now, deep within himself, he was a very passionate man, but that never showed in the way in which he related to the world at large. So he'd mastered this energy completely.